I have some difficulty with smoke because I don't do it a
Drew, I'll
lot.
never offer you a cigar.
Well, I knew Janet wouldn't like it because I remember the scenario at your house around that sort of thing.
We had a guy in the elevator at Fleet headquarters downtown. I got in. It was in the morning. Everybody was getting in for work. And this jerk got on the elevator, and he had one of these huge, stinky, smelly cigars. And as I was walking into the door, he was already there, and there were several other people standing in the elevator. And I stopped right in the doorway and put my hand up to hold the door, and I just looked him square in the eye and said, "You don't intend on smoking that while we're all in the elevator, do you?" And he just got flabbergasted. He didn't know what to say, and finally managed to blurt out, "No." And I said, "Fine, there's an ashtray right here," and I took the cigar and put it in the ashtray.
Oh gosh, it looks like
Disgusting thing. You know, I don't have any problem with people smoking cigars if they don't do it in a confined area like that. And cigarette smoking, too, for that matter, in a confined area. So, anyway.
Gosh.
I
Well,
don't want any troughs tonight.
we'll keep the energy up.
We'll keep that energy level.
I get to be the bar.
Oh, fantastic.
I always
Oh,
wanted to be a
barkeeper.
barmaid.
Super. Chin chin.
You know, you can go to school for this now.
That's what you call a PhD.
Now, the question I was really interested in is that you had mentioned earlier is, do you think the pain was less the last 3 days on your holiday because you were distracted,
No.
or that it was objectively something that happened?
It was objectively something that happened because I think you know I'm seeing Dr. Goldberg.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and he had put me on a regimen of methadone and trazodone, and the timing was just about right for that. And the increased methadone and the introduction of the trazodone coincided with the evacuation of my bowels, and so those last 3 days was a combination of being free of any buildups in the bowels, and also the pain medication that I had been on at that time for about a week and a half. So the timing was just right, and it was just it was glorious the last 3 days, and actually it spilled over into when we got home. We got home on Saturday, and Sunday and Monday, and Sunday and Monday I was in real good shape. I think I started to get a little under on Tuesday, and then by Wednesday I was starting to go back to the bowel problems, and we have learned that that's just so long as I'm on the methadone, so long as I'm on the pain medication, I'm going to have the problems with the bowels. In my opinion, and I think Dr. Wyman and a few other people would support this too, the bowels are just flat shut down. There is just very little activity, and we're trying to stimulate them with laxatives and stool softeners and simethicone, and just to try and keep something going there. And we haven't been too successful.
Do you think that's the main problem that causes you the pain, is the accumulation of material in your bowels as opposed to something else?
Right now, that's what I'm having to contend with. Yeah, the question is, okay, I can always say, well, let's go off the methadone and the trazodone and see what happens. But the reason I went on the methadone and the trazodone to begin with was because there was other abdominal pain that probably can be attributed to tumor or to just the general condition there. So the question I have to ask myself is, do I want to live with this pain, or do I want to go back to the other pain? Well, this, the pain associated with the lack of motility in the bowels, we might be able to get some kind of regimen here to where I can dispose of the materials. It's a question of getting regimented. Whereas the other pain, it's pretty much assured that if I did go off the medication, there's no way that I would have to stay on medication, because that pain that I'm taking the medication for, I'm sure would come back, because the only thing that has happened since the pain first started was the radiation treatments, and those are done with now. So it's really just a circle. Which pain, it's a choice of which pain do I want to live with. And right now I think I'll stick with this one and see if we can overcome it.
What is the status of your tumor now?
Interesting question. You'll understand why I say interesting in a minute. The last word we had was that in all probability there is a tumor in the abdominal area, and then the abnormalities in the rectal area, and the abnormality in the pancreas. We were talking to Dr. Wyman last Wednesday, and we were talking about a CAT scan. Specifically, I was asking him if we were going to do another CAT scan towards the end of March, and he kind of scratched his head and he said, well, I thought that, that was in direct contradiction to the way you're approaching the disease now. And the way I've been approaching the disease, from his understanding, is that I want to be as happy and content as I possibly can. Which means that I want to live in ignorance. If there is something there, why find out about it? That would just increase my anxiety and just make things a little tougher. And that's a good point. Dr. Liffman, who is a surgeon, has already put forth the idea that it's not going to serve any purpose to do any more surgery, because of his opinion is that the cancer is throughout that area of my body. So he is opposed to doing any more surgery. And I think Dr. Wyman kind of goes along with that. I think what Wyman is saying is there's a very good probability that, very high probability that I have some tumor growing, and that there might be some problems beginning to take shape in other parts of my body, like the rectal area and the pancreas. So why do anything about it? They wouldn't be able to do anything about it. So why even find out that, for example, yes, the abnormality in the pancreas has grown a little bit. Why find that out? There's nothing we could do about it. And I kind of agree with that.
Do you prefer not to have as much objective information about what is going on with you? Do you agree with the idea that the more you know, the more anxious you'll be?
I don't know. I'm a bit confused about that right now. I don't know what I want. Last Wednesday when I saw Dr. Wyman, I started out by saying, hey, look, I want to know because I want to know what my options are. And then the more we talked, and he expressed his views about his understanding of how I wanted to confront the disease at this stage. Listening to him, he was making good sense. And it's true. Why at this point do I want to find out anything? There's nothing that can be done. I doubt seriously that we would perform any more surgery. If the abnormalities have in fact increased, why do I want to find out about it? There's nothing that can be done. So I'm really confused at this point as to what I want to do. I'm wrestling. He is arranging for or setting up an appointment for a CAT scan, but I can call it off if I want. So I really don't know, Drew. I'm really I'm a little torn there. One question that we asked him, I don't know, some time ago, we were discussing my going on disability, on permanent disability, and the question was, well, Ed, I had asked him, how much longer do I have to live? And he said, well, what difference would it make? And I said, well, if I've got a reasonable length of time, then I would consider continuing to go to work. But if I don't have a reasonable length of time, then I think I'll just go ahead and go on permanent disability. And he said, well, define your parameters. And I said, well, if you tell me I've got 24 months or less, I'd probably go on disability. If you tell me I've got 24 to 36 months, that's kind of a gray area. But if you tell me I've got more than 36 months, then I'll probably continue working, or try to continue working. And he said, he just looked at me and he said, go ahead and take disability. Now, I interpret that to mean that 24 months is probably about the maximum.
Are you losing weight?
Oh, God, yeah. In fact, he put on the insurance claim form, he used the word anorexia.
How much weight have you lost since last
well,
we've met?
Since last we met, I honestly don't know. My weight had been down to about 120, and now I think I'm down to about 115. I actually gained a pound though when we were in Jamaica.
Did you? It shows there's some good things. And how in the past, you know, like when you went to Vietnam, Vietnam's a heavy trip. How did you handle stress there? I mean, you had to see your own life threatened, see people around you killed. Did you see that, incidentally? Did you ever have to kill anyone yourself?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've got a body count.
Did you ever have to go in a situation where children were involved? You know, and they were mined, weren't they? Sometimes. And
I've seen the aftermath of VC going through a village, and I've seen the aftermath of things like that.
was that difficult?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was very difficult. And you know, I've seen I had some friends who were killed in Vietnam, and there were some very difficult things there. But you know, you're starting to ask the question, how did I deal with it? I don't know. I don't know if I could ever. I've never stopped to think about how I dealt with it. All I know is I dealt with it. I guess, well, one of the ways that I know I dealt with it is that I accepted, as I have now, well, then I was just accepting the possibility. Now I'm accepting the probability, the high probability event of death, of dying. And I don't know if there is a systematic approach to that, to dealing with that, but it is something I think that everyone deals with. The guys in Vietnam, or people in a situation like that, you deal with it maybe on a subconscious level, but you do have to deal with the possibility of your dying. And once you learn to accept that, then I think everything else just kind of falls into place.
Were you able to accept that? Did you accept that you may be killed like
Sure.
a buddy?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
How did that come? I mean, how did you, when you went over there, did you say, I'm young, handsome, bright, but I may die? Or did it hit you when you began to see your best friend, or not best friend necessarily, but a friend killed, or see an American maimed or dead, or a
The day I landed in Vietnam, I was with a buddy, a guy by the name of Bob Sharpless, who I still see from time to time. And we landed at Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Saigon. And I said to Bob, I just have a feeling, Bob, that something is going to happen to me. And he just, you know, he just kind of shrugged it off and said, don't be an asshole, you know, something like that. So I always had the feeling that I was, you know, just that close to death. And you were. I mean, you had to. The unit that I was in was constantly exposed to life-threatening situations. We were an aircraft recovery unit, and I flew over 50 combat missions while I was there, and you're confronted with that, with life-threatening situations frequently. So I don't think it was a conscious effort on my part to deal with it. It was just a realization somewhere along the line that, hey, they're shooting at me, and I'm shooting back at them, and you very quickly, you learn to respect that bullet, the guy that's shooting at you, or that mortar round that goes off next to you, or the hand grenade or something. You learn to respect that missile that could end your life. And you don't sit down and say, well, now see, I've got to learn how to accept death. You don't go through any process like that. It's just kind of like, I think it's probably subconscious more than anything else. And if you don't accept it, I think a lot of the guys who have had problems in dealing with their Vietnam experience, I think a lot of it might have to do with the fact that they never really accepted this relationship with death.
How many people did you have to kill, or do you remember?
My count was officially 22.
Did any particular person you've ever were involved with, like a man your own age, who strike you and really haunt you, or in any way make you not sleep, or was it such that it was survival?
For a while after I got back from Vietnam, I had some sleepless nights, and would occasionally wake up screaming and in a cold sweat kind of thing, but it didn't last very long. And there are no lingering dreams. There are lingering emotions, lingering feelings. Rainy days sometimes just really get to me, and I'll get very maudlin and melancholy and just want to be left alone. And just because of the monsoons over there. Monsoons were, that was Charlie's weather. That's when we would get a lot of crap.
That's when it would come back. Sort of. Do people who've been in hurricanes or in tornadoes have that same feeling when they hear a strong wind? Is the fear and anxiety of when something was destroyed comes back? What was worse, having cancer or being in Vietnam and being exposed to it? In what way?
I know I'm going to die, and there was a lot of pain. I am experiencing a lot of pain, and I am married. I'm going to leave loved ones behind, and they know I'm going to die, and so forth. So it's much more difficult with this. At least with, in Vietnam, you didn't know. I mean, you accepted the possibility, but nobody actually said to you, hey, Ed, you're going to die of a bullet. I mean, nobody says that to you.
The fear of being maimed wasn't.
The fear of being maimed in Vietnam?
Being left without an arm.
Never thought about that.
Never thought.
Never thought about it. No. And I never really thought about dying either. I mean, I just knew that the possibility was there, and once you accepted it, you go on and you do your job and you do what you have to do, and that's it. But I mean, in all those circumstances where I found my life threatened, at the end of the day, I wouldn't say, "Phew, another close call." I wouldn't go through that process. It was, you did your job, you did what you had to do. You'd rescue a downed aircraft, take care of the crew. You'd shoot people if you had to, and then you went back to your base, and you had a beer or a Coke, or you'd slice open a watermelon and eat.
I'm interested in how you coped there. A lot of people obviously began to smoke dope and things like that to make it easier. Did you ever do that?
Never did.
Not even dope?
No. Never touched the weed until I got back here to the States. And that was experimental. I've had less than one marijuana cigarette in my lifetime.
So the myth that people who are prone to use things like, or the feeling that some people have, is that people who will use chemical substances like alcohol or dope or drugs for pain is not, in your own case, you didn't in the past like drink in Vietnam when it was awful, or smoke marijuana to make it easier.
No, I did drink a lot when I was in Vietnam, but it wasn't because of the situation. It was just because it was the only damn thing to do. I mean, when you weren't flying missions, you played poker and got drunk.
What about?
Why don't we just pause now?
Just make things a little tougher, and that's a good point. Dr. Liffman, who is a surgeon, has already put forth the idea that it's not going to serve any purpose to do any more surgery, because of his opinion is that the cancer is throughout throughout that area of my body. So he is opposed to doing any more surgery. And I think Dr. Wyman kind of goes along with that. I think what Wyman is saying is there's a very good probability that, a very high probability that I have some tumor growing, and that there might be some problems beginning to take shape in other parts of my body, like the rectal area and the pancreas. So why do anything about it? They wouldn't be able to do anything about it. So why even find out that, for instance, for example, yes, the abnormality in the pancreas has grown a little bit. Why find that out? There's nothing we could do about it. And I kind of agree with that.
Do you prefer not to have as much objective information about what is going on with you? Do you agree with the idea that the more you know, the more anxious you'll be?
I don't know. I'm a bit confused about that right now. I don't know what I want. Last Wednesday when I saw Dr. Wyman, I started out by saying, hey, look, I want to know because I want to know what my options are. And then the more we talked, and he expressed his views about his understanding of how I wanted to confront the disease at this stage. Listening to him, he was making good sense. And it's true. Why at this point do I want to find out anything? There's nothing that can be done. I doubt seriously that we would perform any more surgery. If the abnormalities have in fact increased, why do I want to find out about it? There's nothing that can be done. So I'm really confused at this point as to what I want to do. I'm wrestling. He is arranging for or setting up an appointment for a CAT scan, but I can call it off if I want. So I really don't know, Drew. I'm really I'm a little torn there. One question that we asked him, I don't know, some time ago, we were discussing my going on disability, on permanent disability, and the question was, well, Ed, I had asked him, how much longer do I have to live? And he said, well, what difference would it make? And I said, well, if I've got a reasonable length of time, then I would consider continuing to go to work. But if I don't have a reasonable length of time, then I think I'll just go ahead and go on permanent disability. And he said, well, define your parameters. And I said, well, if you tell me I've got 24 months or less, I'd probably go on disability. If you tell me I've got 24 to 36 months, that's kind of a gray area. But if you tell me I've got more than 36 months, then I'll probably continue working, or try to continue working. And he said, he just looked at me and he said, go ahead and take disability. Now, I interpret that to mean that 24 months is probably about the maximum.
Are you losing weight?
Oh, God, yeah. In fact, he put on the insurance claim form, he used the word anorexia.
How much weight have you lost since last we've met?
Since last we met, I honestly don't know. My weight had been down to about 120, and now I think I'm down to about 115. I actually gained a pound though when we were in Jamaica.
Did you? It shows there's some good things. And how in the past, like when you went to Vietnam, Vietnam's a heavy trip. How did you handle stress there? I mean, you had to see your own life threatened, see people around you killed. Did you see that, incidentally? Did you ever have to kill anyone yourself?
Oh, yeah. I've got a body count.
Did you ever have to go in a situation where children were involved? They were mined, weren't they? Sometimes.
I've seen the aftermath of VC going through a village, and I've seen the aftermath of things like that.
Was that difficult?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was very difficult. And I've seen I had some friends who were killed in Vietnam, and there were some very difficult things there. But you know, you're starting to ask the question, how did I deal with it? I don't know. I don't know if I could ever. I've never stopped to think about how I dealt with it. All I know is I dealt with it. I guess, well, one of the ways that I know I dealt with it is that I accepted, as I have now, well, then I was just accepting the possibility. Now I'm accepting the probability, the high probability event of death, of dying. And I don't know if there is a systematic approach to that, to dealing with that, but it is something I think that everyone deals with. The guys in Vietnam, or people in a situation like that, you deal with it maybe on a subconscious level, but you do have to deal with the possibility of your dying. And once you learn to accept that, then I think everything else just kind of falls into place.
Were you able to accept that? Did you accept that you may be killed like
Sure.
a buddy?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
How did that come? I mean, how did you, when you went over there, did you say, I'm young, handsome, bright, but I may die, or did it hit you when you began to see your best friend, or not best friend necessarily, but a friend killed, or see an American maimed or dead, or a
The day I
Vietnam?
landed in Vietnam, I was with a buddy, a guy by the name of Bob Sharpless, who I still see from time to time. And we landed at Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Saigon. And I said to Bob, I just have a feeling, Bob, that something is going to happen to me. And he just, you know, he just kind of shrugged it off and said, don't be an asshole, you know, something like that. So I always had the feeling that I was, you know, just that close to death. And you were. I mean, you had to. The unit that I was in was constantly exposed to life-threatening situations. We were an aircraft recovery unit, and I flew over 50 combat missions while I was there, and you're confronted with that, with life-threatening situations frequently. So I don't think it was a conscious effort on my part to deal with it. It was just a realization somewhere along the line that, hey, they're shooting at me, and I'm shooting back at them, and you very quickly, you learn to respect that bullet, the guy that's shooting at you, or that mortar round that goes off next to you, or the hand grenade or something. You learn to respect that missile that could end your life. And you don't sit down and say, well, now see, I've got to learn how to accept death. You don't go through any process like that. It's just kind of like, I think it's probably subconscious more than anything else. And if you don't accept it, I think a lot of the guys who have had problems in dealing with their Vietnam experience, I think a lot of it might have to do with the fact that they never really accepted this relationship with death.
How many people did you have to kill, or do you remember?
My count was officially 22.
Did any particular person you've ever were involved with, like a man your own age, who strike you and really haunt you, or in any way make you not sleep, or was it such that it was survival?
For a while after I got back from Vietnam, I had some sleepless nights, and would occasionally wake up screaming and, you know, cold sweat kind of thing, but it didn't last very long. And there are no lingering dreams. There are lingering emotions, lingering feelings. Rainy days sometimes just really get to me, and I'll get very maudlin and melancholy and just want to be left alone. Because of the monsoons over there. You know, monsoons were, that was Charlie's weather. You know, that's when we would get have to take a lot of crap.
That's when it would come back. Sort of. Do people who've been in hurricanes or in tornadoes have that same feeling when they hear a strong wind? Is the fear and anxiety of when something was destroyed? comes back, what was worse, having cancer or being in Vietnam and being
Having
exposed to
cancer.
it? In what way?
I know I'm going to die. And there was a lot of pain. I am experiencing a lot of pain. And I am married, and I'm going to leave loved ones behind, and they know I'm going to die, and so forth. So it's much more difficult with this. At least with, you know, in Vietnam, you didn't know. I mean, you accepted the possibility, but nobody actually said to you, "Hey, Ed, you know, you're going to die of a bullet." I mean, nobody says that to you.
The fear of being maimed wasn't,
The fear of being maimed in Vietnam.
you know, being left without an arm.
Never thought about that.
Never thought.
Never thought about it. No. And you know, I never really thought about dying either. I mean, I just knew that the possibility was there, and once you accepted it, you go on and you do your job and you do what you have to do, and that's it. But I mean, you know, in all those circumstances where I found my life threatened, you know, at the end of the day, I wouldn't say, "Whew, another close call." I wouldn't go through that process. It was, you did your job, you did what you had to do. You'd rescue a downed aircraft, take care of the crew. You'd shoot people if you had to, and then you went back to your base, and you had a beer or a Coke, or you'd slice open a watermelon and eat. You know.
I'm interested in how you coped there. Did, you know, a lot of people obviously began to smoke dope and things like that to make it easier. Did you ever do that?
Never did.
Not even dope?
No. Never touched the weed until I got back here to the States. And that was experimental. I've had less than one marijuana cigarette in my lifetime.
So the myth that people who are prone to use things like, or the feeling that some people have, is that people who will use chemical substances like alcohol or dope or drugs for pain is not, in your own case, you didn't in the past, like drink in Vietnam when it was awful, or smoke marijuana to make it easier.
Now, I did drink a lot when I was in Vietnam, but it wasn't because of the situation. It was just because it was the only damn thing to do. I mean, when you weren't flying missions.
As in the movie Coming Home, you know, individuals who've been quadriplegic or paraplegic were left with these awful injuries.
I don't know. I can't speak for all guys, for everyone that was over there, obviously. That goes without saying. So why did I say it? The people I came in touch with over there, we didn't linger on the possibility of getting maimed, or there were a couple of guys that went a little bonkers because they, every bush had a VC behind it, or they'd go to bed at night and they were dreaming that a VC was under their bunk. I mean, there's some guys that just couldn't handle it mentally, yes, but by and large, the vast majority of the guys, didn't go to bed with those things, didn't dwell on them during their waking hours.
Is it hard to talk about? You know, you're asking, and is it like bringing back a lot of bad memories, or is it something that, just if one had a choice not to talk about something, it'd be something you prefer not to talk about?
There are some things about Vietnam that are still very difficult for me to talk about. There are some things that only Janet knows. I haven't even told my family. But the broad experiences there, I feel very comfortable talking about. This friend of mine, Bob Sharpless, he and I served together for a while in Vietnam, and I've seen him for a couple of times since Vietnam, and went to his wedding and all that. In fact, I just saw him about a month or so ago, and Jen and I are going to go down there. He lives in Pennsylvania. We're going to go down and see him again. We're going to visit the Vietnam War Memorial in D.C. together. And he and I talked about some of the things that happened to us over there. So yeah, it doesn't bother me to talk about it. There are just some things that I probably would not tell you about that are just too painful.
Are those things that you wouldn't talk about more painful to talk about than any aspect of your cancer? I guess that's your
More painful to talk about than any aspect of the cancer.
Now, are there some human experiences then that you've known that are actually more difficult to talk about than having a life-threatening illness like cancer? There are. So that then compared to some of the things you knew and did adapt to, and you came back and helped set up a branch of the bank in Toronto and functioned very well, but you had things that were behind you that are actually more painful as an experience or bring up more pain to talk about than any aspect of the illness you now have.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That isn't always true. There are times, little fragments of time, where talking about the cancer would be more painful to me than talking about those things that, are still very, very difficult. Those Vietnam things, which are still very difficult to talk about. Those things which only Janet knows. I could probably talk about those here again, within a framework of very specific time. I could probably talk about those Vietnam things more freely than I could talk about the cancer thing. But that that may change in a blink. It's just that how do I feel it at any one given moment? Sometimes it's very difficult for me to talk about, and sometimes I can't talk about what I feel about dying, about my ultimate death with cancer. I mean, that is very, I get very, sometimes I just get very uptight about that. But then sometimes I talk about it very freely. With Janet, I mean, I don't talk about it with my friends or even my family. Janet is she is the only one that I've ever had really intimate discussions with about both the Vietnam experiences and the cancer.
What is the difference? Is it that, like, relevant to the cancer, all of us seem to know part of what that experience is like, both from you, because we follow you through it, but also from other people. But none of us here really know Vietnam, so like I can't say, Ed, I've got to tell you, and this is a horror story, but I saw and participated in some awful thing, and you might understand that because you've been there and no one else would understand that. Whereas about the cancer, we've been there to some degree even though we've not had it. Mm-hmm. Is that the difference, or what is it that makes those memories more difficult to talk about?
Well, you want me to get specific. What you're really trying to do here is to get me specific about what Vietnam experience can I not freely talk about.
Not if you don't want to. No, not if you don't want to. What I am interested in is less that than I guess is trying to understand what is the emotional thing, because I'm trying to understand pain, and I guess in the pain of two awful realities, and one you clearly have said, this Vietnam thing is really exceedingly painful in some ways more than other ways, and what is it? Is it the social support that you have around the disease as opposed not to have the social support around the war experiences? Is it?
No, the most painful thing for me to talk about Vietnam was one particular mission where only 2 of us survived, and I'm one of them. And the reason that those guys died, it was a waste. People ran. We were depending on other people, and they ran, and there were a lot of friends that died that day, and they shouldn't have died. Whereas it's easier to deal with cancer because of the support that I've gotten from. It's too much.
No, that's okay. Support is important. To have people around who know what the experience is like.
Yeah. The cancer is a lot easier to deal with because nobody's going to run, and because there are people there who love you and who will support you.
That's so important to for us to really understand it, is what you're really saying then is the running, that somehow you were abandoned at a time of great pain and people suffered. In fact, people died. Why that a painful experience, and so that people who run away from people who have cancer. I remember so poignantly, you said once you want to sort of to come out around cancer and scream, "I have cancer." And in some ways, what you would do by doing that is you'd separate out who'd be around you at that time and who'd run. And that for some people it is scary to have cancer because they are afraid people will run. They'll abandon them.
Yes.
And I think you really got to a really major thing, that you're really saying it's easier to some degree to have something in which people will not run from. At least Janet or some of the other of us will be there, no matter how awful it is, but there people let you down. They ran, and the cost of that running was actually human life.
See, when you talk about pain, there's the physical pain that you can medicate. I have physical pain and it's medicated and it's taken care of. But then there's another kind of pain. Call it spiritual pain, where you can't medicate it. You can't make it go away. It's just there, and that's one of the things that happened in Vietnam, is that you see things and you experience things that you can't take 2 aspirin and go home and go to bed, and that pain stays with you for your life. You live with it, and the only reason it gets easier is because of time, because time just lets you down easily. It helps you digest it, it helps you deal with it. That's the only treatment for that kind of pain. I suppose the doctors can help in some way. I don't know. I've never sought or had to have help with that, to deal with that kind of pain, so I don't know what they do, but I can see where guys could just not cope with that inner pain, that spiritual pain, and it would just tear them up, eat them up inside. I can see that. So the cancer is a little easier to deal with at that level.
It's important to hear. Was there any other time in your life you've known other pain? You've known the pain of your first divorce. Was that pain?
That wasn't painful.
That wasn't painful. We're talking about the easy subject now. Was it at all? I mean, seeing your son.
It was painful, but it wasn't. It's nowhere near anything
that we've just been talking about.
Yeah, it was something that, you come to a realization one day. Thank you. You come to a realization one day that something's got to be done, and you do it. And there wasn't that much pain associated with it. There was some trauma and some anxiety and all that, but dealt with very easily. Excuse me.
Was there any other pain in your life that you would compare, anything that ever went on between you and your parents or siblings, a disappointment in school, a love affair, a previous illness that...
Oh, well, we've all experienced puppy love. There aren't too many things that can compare with that, with the loss of that first love. That is really devastating, especially when you're only about 17 or 18 years old.
Is that, and you're saying that facetiously, or are there aspects that you really feel that to some degree that sense of abandonment would be?
It's very tough on a person to experience that loss of the first really important love in your life. That really hurts.
What made that hurt? How long had you know the person that?
Wendy and I had gone together for about a year and a half, I guess. And I wasn't in love with her. I can distinguish now.
Yes.
But I mean, at that time, that was it. That that was my woman, you know, and to lose her and the way I lost her and all that was really devastating. And I think there are a lot of people who go through that, who experience that.
She was your first love affair.
She was the first woman in my life who I really passionately, soul, mind, emotionless, you know, really grooved on her.
Did you want to marry her?
Yeah.
And how old were you and she when you broke up?
Well, we didn't really break up. It was she was still in France, and I'd come back from France. I was in high school, and my senior year in high school. We were in our senior year in high school, and my dad got his orders to come back to the States, and we had to come back, and she was still living in France, and I didn't see her for months and months and months, and then finally I saw her, and a whole bunch of things had happened, and I lost her, and it was devastating.
How did you lose her? Just by distance, or did she fall in love with someone
Distance
else?
was a part of it, yeah, and her mother just really didn't like me, so she was really pushing this private in the Army, and she got engaged to this guy, and you know, I knew it was wrong, and sure enough it was wrong. She didn't love him, and he didn't love her, and he left her and all that crap. You know, it's just one of those things, and she fell in love with this guy, or thought she fell in love with this guy, and that, you know, it just devastated me.
What is it painful about, do you think, about the end of your first love that makes it so poignantly painful? What is the... What is it about the experience that makes it the sting so great?
I really loved this person, and I thought I wanted to spend the rest of my life with this person, and I wanted to have children with this person, and she was grace and beauty and just everything that I had imagined, you know, in my dreams, and to lose that's why it was so painful, was because I never I never really had a chance to fight back. There she was, 4,000 miles away, and there was nothing, literally nothing, that I could do to fight for her. And not that it would have been successful, but at least I would have had the sustenance of battle, you know, trying to keep her, and then I never had that chance.
Were there any people around you then who could support you or understand what that...
My mother.
Your mother was very supportive?
Yeah, very supportive.
You close to your mother?
Yes, I always have been.
Is she, of the two parents, the individual you're closest to?
Yeah, very much so.
What is she like?
Mom is very intelligent, very independent, terrific business mind. A self-made woman, I think you could say. She's formed a couple of companies in her lifetime, and done some very good things in the business world. She's just a great person. Above and beyond being a mother, she's just really a fine person. Now I see a lot of her faults, you know, and so some of the blush is gone. I'm
She's a human
37
being.
years old. Yeah, she's a human being. Yeah.
There are no parents; they're
Yeah.
just people.
Yeah. So, just a very fine person.
Your father, how old is he?
How old is Dad? Dad is 58, I think.
And your mother?
Mom is I'm 37. I think she's about 53, 54, somewhere in there.
And what does your father do?
Dad is a draftsman, and Mom is an office manager for a company here in Providence.
What is he like?
Dad is a very quiet guy. He comes from the old school. You know, doesn't never lets his emotions show, and very difficult for him to communicate with people, verbalize. Very difficult for him to do that. He's kind of a lonely guy. I think the worst thing my father ever did was go back to the Army. The Army really has a way of stripping you of identity. And I think that is probably one of the things that has hurt my father, is that he doesn't have a clear identity. You know? Maybe he does now, but I think in the past he really didn't. He's a lovable sort of guy, but just a big jerk.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
One sister.
And how old is she?
Pat is 35, I believe. 36? 36, yeah.
And what does she do?
Right now she's working for the American Mathematical Society or something like that. General office work. Pat is a good example of an intelligent person who has failed to find where they belong. And it's sad. It's really sad. Kind of an idealist, angry. Some of her philosophical bents have not ever really been she hasn't put them in proper perspective with reality. There are some conflicts there that she confronts frequently.
Is she ever married?
No. No. I don't like talking about my family too much. Okay?
I'd like to sort of get off it.
Yeah. Yeah. They're very nice and very supportive. And they love me very much. And they want to take care of me. And I think that's the most important thing. To be honest with you. Don't
Only on videotape.
It's like psychotherapy, in which, you know, this is not stuff that one goes and shows to someone. It's going to be yours now to work with. And for you, because the parts that you don't want to show and sort of working through what this illness means to you or this crisis does, in many ways will help you understand and us understand, but our understanding hopefully will help you understand. And it's not a didactic understanding, it's trying to help you really understand what the meaning of this is by what will have to be blocked out. To some degree, blocking out stuff means something in how one has to cope. You know, for some, there are certain things, and obviously my own intuitive sense was to follow the two things that I thought would be the most painful would be the Vietnam experience, because I know that it is painful for a lot of people, and I somehow intuited that it was to you to some degree from how we've talked in the past and what you avoid talking about and don't. And then your parents, because parents are very difficult for people to talk about, but it's also, you know, it's to some degree their presence or absence in your life, you know, will contribute to how you cope and how you depend more on Janet or on someone else. Who do you think you are more like, your mother or your father?
Definitely my mother. Definitely my mother.
In what ways?
In what ways? Emotionally, mentally. I almost, in my early years, well, the first recollection of my father, the first recollection I have of my father is when I was 9 years old. My father was in the service, and there was very little influence, very little male influence in my family, because my father was away so much of the time. And my mother, just a very independent, headstrong, intelligent person, just took charge and, out of necessity, raised my sister and me pretty much on her own. There were some very difficult times in the early years of my parents' marriage. It was right after World War II, and I guess the economy was kind of bad, and things were not well. So I grew up pretty much molding myself after my mother, what I saw in her. So I'm very much like my mother, mentally and emotionally and spiritually, I guess.
Does she have a favorite?
A favorite?
Of the two of you?
Yeah, me.
Does your father?
I think he does, but it's very difficult to answer that, because he is not. It's just very difficult to tap his emotional well. You just don't know what the man is thinking or feeling. Really don't. I think my mother does, but I cannot read my father. I don't understand him emotionally. I don't know what the man's thinking or feeling. Sometimes in fact, sometimes I get the feeling that he is an emotional desert, to be honest with you. And that's simply because he just doesn't know how to communicate with people. He has a very difficult time with it.
You know, one of the things that, and you tell me to stop if you want me to stop on anything, is that makes it hard when you have an illness to work together with caregivers and to work together with nurses and doctors are the population of people we bring from the past. So that if one's mother was more caring and more sensitive and one's father was more distant and enigmatic, one didn't know what he was thinking, one would assume that to some degree to see doctors who many times will be non-disclosive, not as historically nurturing as one's mother may be if you have male doctors, is that would create a problem when you have an illness, because to some degree some of these men are going to be not as disclosive information. You won't know where they're at.
I don't have that problem.
You don't think
I've
that...
managed to, no. I can be very objective about my parents, about my family. And I don't lump other men in with my father. I don't have a problem with male doctors, never have. They have their differences, just like anybody else. I mean, they're people, they're human beings, and some of them are very giving, and some of them aren't giving at all, and some of them are very helpful, and some of them aren't helpful at all. I mean, they're just as different as plumbers, grave diggers, anything else. But I've never had that problem.
Do you get on better with nurses or doctors, do you think, on the whole?
I think I get on better with women than I do with men as a whole.
And what do you think, what is it about women that makes them easier to get on with? Or that you feel more comfortable
levels,
with?
I think. I think that I am more, as far as, generalizations are...
That's okay.
Yeah. But as far... Men, I don't have a lot of the stigmas that men seem to attach themselves to. I don't have this macho image or anything like that. And I'm very open. I'm a very open person, emotionally and intellectually. I just open up. And I think women are more like that. I think women are more open, more candid, more giving than men are generally. And I think that's why I get along better with women than I do with men. In fact, I would venture to say that some men might even dislike me because I am so open and giving and, and trusting and I'm a book. I'm an open book.
That can be true. Some people are threatened by people who will say too much that's on their mind or deal more within feelings than objective words.
It's gotten me into trouble too sometimes, being that open, with my emotions.
In what ways?
Well, just being very trusting of other people and telling them what is going on in the deep reaches of my mind and letting out some of my insecurities. I've had that backfire on me sometimes, so I've had to learn to be a little more careful in, with letting out stuff like that.
If you had a choice, would you prefer a man or a woman doctor? If you really could choose, just sight unseen in one word, offered you two people and we said, here are two of the most competent oncologists in the world, and one is Dr. Sally Jones and the other is Dr.
I wouldn't make the choice.
Sam Jones.
I wouldn't make the choice because one is a man and one is a woman. I wouldn't.
You don't feel there'd be something that might be?
No, that wouldn't, making a choice based on sex is totally alien to me. I wouldn't do it. It would just, what might happen is I might get in there and say, well, if I've got a choice, let me spend some time with each of them.
Yes.
and then I would go with, with my feelings about the person. And there might be a better chance that I would choose the woman than I would the man, because I seem to have a better rapport with women in general. So but it wouldn't be because one is a man and one is a woman. It would just be because I get along better with one than I do the other.
As a particular human being, not
Yeah.
as a sort of generic
Yeah.
man or woman.
Yeah, I wish I could think of words like that.
Sort of like one goes to the grocery store and buys generic soap as opposed to. What about, I don't know all about where you grew up in that. Where were you born?
In Providence, Rhode Island.
Providence, Rhode Island. And you got to France somehow. What happened after you were born?
Well, my father was in the service, and he got assigned to France, and we went there when I was, how old was I? 14 or 15 when we went to France.
You
But
lived-
in between, I was born in Providence, and my father was away in the service, and my mother was working, and I lived with my grandparents for a while. My sister lived with an aunt, and then we lived for a while in Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and Framingham, Massachusetts, and Westerly, Rhode Island. Then we went to Europe, France, and
Where in France were you?
La Rochelle. Best 3 years of my life.
And that was like
I
from
can't say
age
that anymore.
15 to 17?
Yeah, I was 15 when I got there, and we left just before my 18th birthday.
What made that special?
Oh, just the growing up. What an experience. Fantastic.
How did
Best
you,
education that I could have gotten, I think. Just the living experiences. Some of the people I came in contact with.
Our fantasies run wild.
There was one older woman that I will never forget. Just everything about it. It was just beautiful, beautiful 3 years. Wouldn't trade them for anything.
How old was an older woman for a boy of 17?
They were in their early 30s, as I recall. 32.
How that changes as we go older. What?
In fact, I was just saying to Janet, or to somebody tonight, to an 80-year-old, a 60-year-old is young.
Yes, that's true. That's true. It's all relative, isn't it? What? Did you go to public schools, parochial schools,
Mhm.
prep schools? What? A little bit of everything.
All the above. I went to parochial schools. I went to public schools. Went to military schools.
What type of grades did you get? What type of student were you?
Oh, I was a high B student. Very good student.
Did you play in any sports or anything?
Played them
like
all. Played football, basketball. I was a three-letter man. Football, basketball,
that?
and
Really?
track.
Fantastic. Right.
Yeah.
What? When you got out of high school, what did you do? Came back to the United States at when you were 18.
Went through the emotional trauma of losing my first love, and then started at the University of Rhode Island and the College of Business Administration. Did that for about a year and a half. Just was not with it. I had no more interest in college than I had in becoming president of the United States at that time. It was just a total waste, total waste. So I dropped out of college and became the assistant manager of a mobile station in Warwick, Rhode Island. And then Uncle Sam came looking for me, and that's when I joined, and vowing to go back to school.
How old were you when you joined the Army?
19, I think.
You were in the Army, not the Marines?
Yeah, the Army was it 1965 when I joined.
65.
March of 65, so that would make me 19 years old, just before my 20th birthday.
And how long were you in?
33 months and 19 days.
What made you leave?
But my hitch was up.
Your hitch was on?
Yeah, and
So
early.
those odd days is
It's
then?
because I came back from Vietnam. If you had less than 90 days, they would give you an early out. Because I had less than 90 days on my hitch, so they let me out.
Did you become more goal-oriented in the Army?
Thought I did. Thought I had the world by the short hairs when I came out. When I came out, I said, okay, I'm going to go back to college. But I was going to wait until the fall semester, so I became a teller for Fleet National, well, at that time it was Industrial National Bank. Became a teller and worked until college started, and then went back to school. And kept the job as a teller. I worked Thursdays and Friday nights. And once again, did not want to be in college, didn't know what the hell I was doing there. So I dropped out and started working for a detective agency. And did that for a while.
Providence or in California?
In Providence, yeah. I'm still in
Providence.
Rhode Island.
Okay, we're still in Rhode Island.
Well, I'm Warwick now. So worked for the detective agency for a while, and then actually applied to the Warwick Police Department and was accepted to their academy, and went to the academy and all that, and got disqualified because I was 5 pounds underweight. So that's when I said in 1971, enough is enough. I got to find out what the hell I'm going to do. I was 27 years old by this time. I said, I got to find out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. So I just split and went to California.
Were you married then yet?
Yeah.
You hadn't been married. You went to California. Where did you go in California?
Southern California. Went to live with a cousin up in Ontario, California, when I first got there. Wanted to be a police officer. In fact, that's why I went out there, because the weight requirements weren't as ridiculous in California as they were here. But everywhere I went, I put in my application, had a letter of recommendation from the chief of police in Warwick. And everyone wanted me, but they had to wait for budgets to be approved and all that. And I said, well, I've got to generate some income here while you guys get your budgets approved. So I went to work for a bank, Bank of America in California, and met my first wife. And then when all the police departments got their budgets approved and they said, hey, come on to work for us, by that time I had met my first wife. We were getting serious, and she said, make a choice. If you're going to go to the police, if you're going to become a police officer, you're not going to get married to me. So I said, okay. So I gave up the police career and stayed with Bank of America, and stayed with them for about 10 years, 10 or 11 years. And got divorced in there somewhere, and met Janet in there somewhere, and got married to Janet somewhere in there, and moved back east.
How long was your first marriage?
A little over 6 years, as I recall.
Your son's 3 years old? No.
He's 5 years old.
5 years old.
He'll be 5 in June.
He's living in California with your first wife. How frequently do you see him?
About once a year now. In fact, we're going to try and get him out here in June. We had him out here last year for a couple of weeks in September. And this year we want to get him out in June for his 5th birthday. My ex-wife and I have a good relationship. You know, it was a clean divorce. There's no animosity and no backbiting or anything like that. We talk to each other on the phone frequently. So everything's okay there.
How long have you been married to Janet now?
A year.
1 year.
Yeah, a year in January.
So this really...
Well, actually, we were married twice.
You were married twice.
The first time wasn't legal. We were married in May, and my ex-wife called me one day and said, guess what? The divorce was not final at the time you and Janet got married, so we had to get married again in January of 82. So the first time we got married was in May of 81, and the second time was January of 82. Don't tell that to anybody, because when we were in Canada, we weren't legally married. And the bank was supporting us very nicely.
How long did you know Janet before you married her?
3 years, I think. Let's see, Janet and I met in 78. Yeah, about 3 years before we got married.
Excuse me, this is so wonderful to listen to. I feel like going all night, but we are now the only people left in the building. And they are wondering how long we're going to be. We've had to give them a time limit,
Sure.
so we should probably wind up in South
Okay.
Carolina.
We've talked a lot tonight, haven't we, really? A lot of heavy emotional
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. I just want you to know that I have a very good feeling about myself. I think I'm very much in touch with myself. And you know, like anything else, I'm sure I could stand a little improvement someplace. In fact, Janet lets me know frequently that I could use a little improvement sometimes. But I do, treasure is the wrong word. I do appreciate the times we talk. They're good therapy for me.
That makes me happy.
Good.
I have two quick questions. One is kind of obvious, people may think of. Do you associate your cancer with any of the experiences you had in Vietnam?
No. You know, the one question I've asked myself is Agent Orange. But it's, to me, it's a ridiculous, it's almost a ridiculous question. It's certainly a waste of energy to consider it, because how would you prove it? What would you do with it if you could? So.
The other thing is, did you learn any coping strategy there that you were conscious of that has stayed with you?
Yeah, but you know, I don't know if I could verbalize it. I do know that I feel, I think I have a very, I am very able to cope. And I know what I do, and I know how I do it. I probably should try to verbalize it, I suppose, some one of these days, because it has helped me through a lot of tough spots.
And you think of it beginning in Vietnam?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Oh, yeah, because before Vietnam, Mom and Dad were always there, and I didn't have to cope with anything or deal with, you know, the worst thing I had to deal with was losing my first love. Big deal, you know. That's when you got to deal with dying. I mean, that's about the top, you know. That's where you want to. I think that's where you eventually want to wind up anyway.
You don't have a choice.
Really? Yeah, it's either fish or cut bait, you know. And in fact, that is one of the things I use to cope, is that little expression. Fish or cut bait, fella. You know, when reality is staring you in the face, it's fish or cut bait. You either deal with it, or you blow your brains out. And I don't mean that literally. You know, I mean, blow your brains out. Go off the deep end. Do yourself a hell of a lot more harm by not dealing with it. You know. Hide. You know, putting it in its proper place in my memory bank.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
All that's carried with us, though, in different ways. And,
Sure.
and it's
Yeah,
always
yeah.
present when the pain of the past is always a partner at the dinner table of the present. And so that much in how we cope is determined by a population of people and memories that come from our entire life.
Sure, and you know, dealing with this life-threatening situation, I think of how I dealt with the life-threatening situations in Vietnam, and in particular that one day where a lot of good guys died, and I knew as things were happening, I was very conscious and very aware of what was going on, and I knew that I had to live. But if I couldn't, that I was going to die doing something good, right, carrying my dead buddy, whatever. I was just very conscious of having to do the things necessary for substance, necessary for orderliness, necessary for, if there is going to be a tomorrow, I've got to do these things to make sure that it's the best tomorrow that it can be. And that's the way I live now. That's the way I deal with death now. I don't know when I'm going to die, but I've got to make sure that I'm doing things now so that if there is a tomorrow, that tomorrow will be the best that it possibly can. And that day when everyone was dying around me and people were running and all that, that's exactly what I was doing, is that I was preparing for tomorrow. And still trying to live, still trying to survive.
Did you ever think of suicide then? Did you ever want to just say that the bullet hit me with all this stuff happening around me,
No
losing
way.
buddies and
No way.
awful life?
No way. No.
Your instinct to want to live was very great.
Very great, yeah. And it's, I've had some thoughts recently about dying, about, Jesus Christ, it'd be so good, because there won't be any more pain.
Yes.
But still no thoughts about taking my own life. It'll be over with.
Are you a fighter? Do you see yourself as a fighter?
I've always been a fighter. It's getting a little more difficult. It's, I'm getting weak, Drew. You know, I just, it's starting to take its toll. And I don't,
You feel tired?
tired and weak. And I hurt.
We should stop. Thank you.
Would you like a little background music, a little muzak, light
no,
chamber?
Actually not.
Are you sure?
Yes.
I could arrange for just about anything you wanted.
Well,
Okay.
What's the hardest part now?
It's just so incredibly thin. He's really anorexic. And he's just not gaining weight back. Now he's going... He was in so much pain, so then he finally saw Dr. Goldberg, and who got him on such pain medication that now he's been without pain a couple of months. But now the side effects of being on the narcotics, just the complete shutdown of his bowels and everything. Now it seems as though the memory of that pain is erased enough that now he wants to go off the pain medication. He would rather deal with the pain than deal with all this that he's having to deal with. Which mainly he's just, it's what's ruined his appetite, and he can't gain any weight back, and he's just pretty miserable all the time, just feels really lousy, and so it's like a vicious cycle. I pray that the pain won't be as bad, or in fact won't be there when he completely goes off, but...
Do you think he is going to completely go off?
He says it, and he means it. He's been very... he is. I mean, he's started reducing already, gone down 30 milligrams from where he was. He's following Dr. Goldberg's
What exactly is
thing.
he on now?
Methadone,
And how much?
100. And now he's down to 70.
How do you feel about him taking the methadone?
Fine. I mean, it was fine until this part. He's just so miserable, and he's just lost so much weight. And I feel pretty comfortable and confident that that's what it is, that it's not the cancer, because Dr. Wyman doesn't think it is. And
You think the loss of weight is due to the drugs he's taking rather than the cancer itself?
right, as a result of the drugs, because his bowels just don't function. He is so miserable when he eats. It's just like a piece of lead sitting on his stomach. It just doesn't move through, that he barely eats anything, and he just feels rotten.
Is he happy at all now?
You know, bless his heart. I used to really, in fact, it kind of used to bother me. He's such an eternal optimist. And it used to. A couple of years ago, I thought it was really a fault to be such an optimist, that think, oh, everything's going to turn out for the better and right, and sometimes almost seem like such a fool, you know. I can think of a couple of times, and now I think that's his savior, that he is like that, because he's still, I mean, I have to admit, after being home through a weekend, by Sunday night, there's some weekends I could just crawl in the bed and pull up the covers and never come out. I mean, I want to totally give up, and it's so awful and depressing. And he's just, well, now when I get off, this time when I get off the methadone and I know my, all my bowels get back functioning, then I'll gain some weight and and it's constantly, and before that it was, when I get on this pain medication, we'll get that taken care of, and that'll be, he just keeps going. But he hasn't been okay and hasn't felt good in over 9 months, and yet he's still, every day, well, it's going to get better, it's going to get better.
Do you see him as a fighter?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he just keeps on plugging away, and I just don't know where he gets the strength. And I've said that a couple times to him, and he actually says he gets it from me. And I don't see how he can get it from me when I'm around 2 days, and I'm a basket case. I'm totally depressed and don't see how he can keep on fighting, and isn't it awful, and let's pull over the covers.
You know, one of the things that when I met with him, was talking about, and in fact, is that I think that when one is struck, you and Ed, with something like cancer, which is a really heavy trip, a lot of the conflicts that are in the past come to the fore, and a lot of the adaptive mechanisms, like I myself see Ed as a fighter. You know, he was an ambitious man and was doing well at the bank. I see him as building stuff up, and that he's not going to take something sitting down, and that, but that now that he has an illness like cancer, against this man who is a sensitive and very open person around what's going on with you and Dennis and Stephanie and myself, is that there is the same fighter that that would build a bank. Now it's not building a bank, it's fighting for his life. Where do you think you get your strength to adapt from? What do you see any things going on in your relationship now to manage what is, there's no role models, Janet. Here you are, young, attractive, in your second marriage, optimistic, things were going well. Who do you look to manage, to fight, to adapt, whatever the word is in your case?
I don't know. Him, that's all I have. I don't have any role models. I guess I, in a way, appreciate the kinds of things that have happened to me. I lost a brother when I was 15, and then went through a bad first marriage, and I guess those kind of things are the baggage that you build up to be able to draw on the strengths that those helped to create in you, the survivor. And I guess I do have had a lot of strength build up through things in the past. I don't know.
You told me a little bit about the death of your brother once in your first marriage, and I think what went on to some degree, when we talked at that time, and you looked upon those as things, you've learned certain things.
Yeah.
Tell me about the death of your brother. Were you close to him?
Yeah. He was about 6 years older than I was. He was second, and there were 4 of us. I was last. Very close. Knit family, very close. And that was just a really devastating time. And I was at such a, I don't know what you call it, but it was a crucial age to go through something like that. I didn't adjust well, and I put my poor parents through a long bad time, almost a couple of years there. But they were extremely supportive, and they have been really supportive. My whole family's been just tremendously supportive in all of this, and so I guess I draw on their strength. I don't know, it's true, I don't have any role models. I don't know anybody else.
Your family, though, is supportive?
Tremendously, yes.
Your mother and father are still alive?
Yes, yes. And in fact, they not only give me support, but they give Ed a lot of support too, and that helps, I think, a lot.
How old's your father?
My father's 65.
And what does he do?
He's retired.
What did
So he was with the telephone company, Bellatel, and marketing engineer, something like that.
And what type of man is he? How would you describe him?
I a wonderful sense of humor, incredibly witty. The one thing that he has been doing for the last year, ever since Ed's not been well, every week my parents send him something. My mother finds something and my father writes a humorous letter to go with it, and they are so incredibly witty, and Ed just lives through the week for looking to see what they're going to send in the mail this week, and it's always some kind of a weird piece of something, and he invents a name for it and tells a whole story behind it, and it's just some of his non sequiturs are just really something else. I've kind of been through a lot with my father. My mother's very open and demonstrative. My father wasn't always, I think, rather insecure and just uncomfortable with being open. And the death of my brother did a lot to push him into being more open with his family and realizing that his family was the most important thing to him. And going through this with Ed has opened him up. I was talking to a friend whose father had the same kind of cancer Ed does, and I guess died a couple of years ago, and she was saying, if I was telling her about all this that we're going through and the talking and the taping, and she was saying that if she had one thing that she could change, they would have talked about it. Her father never talked about it to her mother or the rest of the family, and they never talked to each other. They never talked about it. And she really wishes that would be the one thing she changed, is go back and talk about it. And that made me think that if this had happened to my father, it could be very much the same way, because I think he's not good at expressing himself, and I think he would have turned very inward. But now going through this with me, he's opened up a lot, and I've kind of had to draw on him, and I started talking to him, and he has responded.
You feel you've learned, he's gained something
I
from
think
this awful
so,
experience,
yeah.
just as you have.
And now I think if something happened to them, they'd be a lot more open and know that it's worth it to talk about it. And
Do you feel you've gotten closer to your father through this?
yeah, I do. Absolutely. For one thing, the way he's just been so wonderful to Ed, sending him these things and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
What, you were 15 when your brother died?
Mm.
And your brother then was about 21?
Mm-hmm.
What had happened to your brother?
He went to his 21st birthday party and was coming home and had a car accident.
Was killed immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you feel then? What was the impact of that crisis on you? Did you?
I think the one thing that I remember the most is that, and it's so classic, you see it in movies and everything else, is that I never really told him I loved him. And that just devastated me. I mean, that part. There were things I wanted to say to him and wish I had. And of course that does, I think people go through that when their first death that they experience. And that changes them for the rest of their life, and that I've never not said anything that I cared to say. And I've had a lot of people, friends as well as intimate friends in the past, have made comments about how incredibly open I am and will say anything, and in fact, at times when it could make me very vulnerable, I still am like that, and I do, and I know that it stems from that, directly from that.
Do you think because you didn't say things to your brother at the time before he died, that's encouraged you to say things to Ed?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely, everything and anything. But we'd been like that before, but now even more so. I mean, I won't let a second go by without practically without touching him or saying something to him or just making the most of the fact that he's there.
You don't want any unfinished business?
Nothing unfinished. And I'm very comfortable right now knowing that there will be nothing unfinished.
That you're really doing
Yes.
everything?
Yeah. I think the only thing that, if something suddenly happened, I'm all prepared now that this will be very slow, and in fact, we can go through it together. I think the only thing that would be just totally devastating is something, I'm counting on that, if something suddenly happened to him, and he suddenly was in an accident or had a heart attack, that would be very difficult for me to deal with, because I have certain things in my mind planned to say and do. Yeah.
Were you at all angry after your brother died?
Oh, tremendously angry. I think, I'm sure a lot of what I went through is very classic, but, oh, a lot of anger and didn't know how to vent it, and got very angry with my parents a couple of times. I remember one terrible dramatic scene. I have another brother that's 2 years older than I am. And I remember I had thrown a terrible tantrum and went running outside, and my brother, and just screaming at my parents and terribly ugly to them. And he came out, he's just one of these real sweet people, and he just came out and just grabbed me and started shaking me and saying, how can you talk to them like that? They've just lost a son. And I said, I remember screaming, well, I'm still alive. And, you know, I guess I just, that kind of thing, and why don't they notice me? I don't know what I needed, and they didn't know what I needed, and it was just a terrible time. Because they were incredibly loving and affectionate, trying to make up for it and trying to help me. It's just that...
Do you feel angry at all now that a brother was taken away from you, and now your own husband, a lover, is taken away from you?
I feel angry about my husband. It's been long enough. It's been, 13, almost 14 years since I lost my brother, and 14, almost 15. And I'm very much over that. In fact, memories are so faint, almost, which is kind of sad to say. Sometimes I still think about it. But that anger or whatever of losing it, it's gone. And it's different. Definitely anger about losing my husband. I mean, I finally found the perfect relationship in my life and counted on that for the rest of my life, and that makes me angry, sure.
Who are you angry at? God?
Fate.
Fate. Do you believe in God?
Yeah, I do believe in God, but I don't believe He loves me. I know that, and He's been awfully good to me, and I know He'll take care of me after this, and I know He'll make everything okay for me. So I'm never angry with God. It's more fate, and that's different, and I don't know how that's different, but it's like I get angry with Ed's body. Why is that doing it to him, and why is it doing it to us? And it's almost like it's a separate entity.
Yes, I agree.
Mm.
It's sort of, Ed can be angry at his own body and
Yeah.
be angry and still
Yeah.
want to live life. But your brother died when you were 15. You finished high school. What did you do then?
I went away to college, and all 4 of the kids went away to the same private university, and that was kind of difficult because it only been 2.5 years since I lost my brother, and then my other brother was there still at the college, and the first couple of years were difficult on me. I had a difficult time, a couple of difficult moments I remember of I think maybe I shouldn't have gone to the same school that he'd gone to. And
Where did you go?
to Trinity University in Texas.
You're from Texas originally?
Yeah.
Then you completed college?
Mhm.
What was your major?
Speech and drama.
You wanted to be an actress, I know you said that.
Yeah. No, actually, I really didn't. I wanted to be Barbara Walters. Or Jane Pauley. I don't know which. Probably Jane Pauley. She's younger.
Would you still want to be Jane Pauley?
No.
You never see yourself as doing something in the media? Or?
No, if I pursued anything like that, I would go into acting. Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not that interested in other people.
But you work in the media, right? And I mean, this is sort of one of those interesting experiences in which we're using the media to understand the impact of the crisis on you and Ed and help you understand it. You yourself use the media to help people understand how they come across, and as executives, isn't
yeah.
executive training courses?
No, I don't actually use it for that. I use it more for putting courses on tape. Or doing mini documentaries of programs that we're doing within the bank, that kind of thing. I don't actually tape people and then we analyze them or anything like that. No. Is that what you meant?
Yes.
No, we don't actually do that.
How do you see the media working here? How do you see the videotaping and helping understand, or do you see it at all playing any role? Do you think it is? Would you think this would be different for you and Ed if this weren't being done?
Oh, yes. This has just been incredible therapy just to talk. I mean, if it weren't being, even if it weren't being taped, even if you were just talking to us, it would be different because Not so much me, and Ed. I guess it's more my perception of how it's helped Ed more than even what he would perceive it. It's made him feel, it's drawn attention to him and made him feel special, made him feel like maybe something he has to say about what's happening is important and he can contribute something. I think that's done wonders. A couple of times he's said that if I can just say one thing that'll make the caretakers do something different, or maybe if someone else is watching, make them see that what I'm going through, if they're going through and they can relate to it, that it's normal, whatever, that then maybe this, I don't know if he's actually said this has been worth it, but it makes it a little easier.
In the record, you know, when you're like when you hold a wheel and something. All right. Do you feel you learned anything from the dissolution of your first marriage or the crisis of a divorce that has helped you, much as the death of your brother when you were 15 has helped you in adapting to?
Well, as far as the dissolution of my first marriage, mainly that I would survive, and I can survive, and I will be okay, and the Lord will take care of me and make sure everything's okay. Because every time after things like that have happened, I actually come out for the better, and well, if not for the better, certain good things happen to try and offset it, and I just have so much faith that that will continue to happen, and that to me is my faith and, you know, my way of saying the Lord takes care of me. So I think everything will be cushioned well enough. I believe that I will be okay, cushioned through, you know, support factors, people, family, my job, my house, my home, my dog, whatever.
What do you think you gained out of your brother's death? What was a good outcome of that undesirable event?
Well, I think the main thing was what it did for my parents and the family unit. My father had been a drinker at that time. I mean, he still drinks, but I think it came close to a serious problem, and that completely shocked him out of a possible downhill trend, and strengthened his relationship with my mother and strengthened the relationship within the family. Even though it was anyway, it was a close-knit family. I mean, we always, you know, vacations in the summer, seeing all of the United States, kind of, you know, 4 kids in the car and the parents take off. I mean, it was always that kind of family, your typical American family. But I think that did it. And actually, it started out having a negative effect. I remember the first year or two after that happened, going through the phase of I will never, ever love anyone again because they'll only be taken away from me. And I went through that for quite some time, several years. And then when I grew up and realized that, you know, I guess just that was just a terribly emotional reaction, that instead it was that can happen and that will happen, and there's nothing that will stop that, but then when I do love it will be very strong and very perfect and very wonderful. That interesting about the death of my brother, I think I also went through very much phase. My first husband, I think, was also trying to find my brother in my first husband. Very interestingly, I remember the whole time I was married to him, I would have dreams at night. When I wake up in the morning, he looked a lot like my brother. I couldn't tell which one it was in my dream, whether it was my husband or my brother. Very interesting. Strange. I think not healthy.
Less strange than one knows.
Well, and in fact, yeah, I mean, I remember in one part of the marriage, too, at one point in the marriage, when I suddenly accepted him as family. I went through a big part of, I don't think I could ever really take in my first husband. Went through about the first year of the marriage. I couldn't really accept him as my family. because I was very protective of my family, and it was very close-knit. And when that day, I just remember the day when I finally accepted him as my family. A lot of the love went out of the marriage. Definitely a lot of the sexual love. It's very strange. And I think I realized all of that happened, and I came to grips with all of that in the next few years after that, and went through a whole realization. And all that happened at about the time I met Ed, and really did a whole examining of myself and my values and my priorities and my goals and who was I, and you know. So.
What do you think was a good thing that came out of the divorce?
Just finding some of myself, that it that I was okay, and that I was going to be okay, and that the marriage itself did a terrible thing to me, and that I really lost my self-esteem, and I had a very bad self-image and no self-confidence, and really demolished me. And it was the divorce that, as a result of it, I pulled myself up by the bootstraps and said, I'm okay, and you know, and I am worth something, and one person will never do that to me again. And because of all the things, of course, that I learned from the first marriage, which I think happens to everyone, those kinds of things strengthened the second one.
Well, how old were you when you married Ed?
27.
27, so it's been 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think you will get good out of the loss of Ed? What will be a good thing that will come from this crisis, from this tragedy?
I can't think of anything. Isn't it?
Do you think there's anything
Good can come of it?
that you'll learn anything about yourself, about people, about loving, about life, about relationships?
What I've learned has come from our relationship, certainly not from his death.
You don't feel you yourself have learned anything from it?
Well, this is actually not a good thing. I think I'm learning and have learned that that everything changes. There are no absolutes. That no love is immortal and perfect and will always stay that way. Because just even seeing the changes that we've gone through, and we just have such a good relationship and such a strong love, and that it could be affected the way it has. I don't know. It's almost a little bit of hard reality that
Of
I'm
the three
learning.
crises you've known, death of your brother, the divorce, and Ed's illness, which has been the most difficult?
Well, only because I'm going through this right now, I would say this, but trying, if I were to look back on it over the years, and this were years away from now, actually I would probably say the death of my brother, only because of the age I was, and I just went through such trauma over that.
The feeling you've
Such a
learned certain things.
crucial age. Yeah, I was at a very much of a molding period, molding the person that I was. I think for that reason that probably was. And then this.
Do you feel your first husband's drinking problem at all made you more sensitive to Ed's use of medication?
Oh, it's interesting you say that. It did a couple of times before we were educated on the drugs, which thank God for Dr. Goldberg, and he did, because it was kind of causing problems. Sometimes in the hospital when he mainly the Demerol, injections of Demerol, when they would first take effect, would have certain effects on him. Slight slurring of the speech sometimes, very slight, very cotton mouth, and just enough that, yes, it would set off a tape in my head of remembering when Alan was drunk, because he was never a staggering slobber. It was always kind of a strange, not real in focus kind of drunk. And it set off tapes like that, and which was very hard for me to deal with. And a couple of times I overreacted and kind of lashed out, in fact. But and then, like I said, I think just hearing from Dr. Goldberg and what all he said about it has made that all okay.
You
Yeah.
feel then that the education around medication that played a role, but before that, you did feel that sometimes maybe Ed might be overdosing himself, or
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because all the other doctors thought that was an awful lot sometimes that he would have to take, or, yeah. Yeah, and even when the very first time he went to the hospital, of course, it was before all of this, when I wasn't as accepting and understanding, whatever. When he came out of, see, Ed doesn't drink at all, and neither do I, at all, and so I haven't been around that situation. It had been 4 years, and suddenly, when Ed came out of the anesthesia, he was, terribly out of it and like he was drunk. Oh, it really set off a tape, because it just was so startling. I'd never seen Ed like that, and it was just, it's almost like I blacked out for a second, and there was Alan. Oh, it was horrifying, really disturbing.
so your experience with your first husband really did play a role in how you perceive Ed's use of drugs.
Yeah,
That is-
yeah, oh
You never
yeah.
thought of that before?
Yes, I did. I mean, I did think about it, because I remember saying to Ed a couple of times, I'm sorry, it's just that it reminds me, I'm trying not to overreact, it's just that I've got to tell you what's happening here, and what it's reminding me of when Alan was drunk. I know that's not fair, but that's what's happening. Yeah, so I had mentioned, yeah, that happened.
Is there anything else that's happened in your life that I didn't ask you about that you think has played a role in how you're adapting to this crisis? Is there any? Something I don't know that maybe you're becoming more aware of?
Well, one of the things I'm kind of becoming more aware of right this minute is my sister. My sister is almost 10 years older than I am. She's the oldest, and she had polio when she was 9. She has an extreme curvature of the spine. She was 9, 10 years old, was in bed completely for a year or more in a cast. And her back has gotten much worse over the years. She's 38 now, 39. And my parents just called over the weekend and said that she lives in California, and said that she'd finally gone to see a orthopedic surgeon again. He was referring her to UCLA Medical Center because it's really pretty bad. So I think she's going to probably have to have surgery. And she said something about, my parents said something about, she said it's not affecting her life right now, but she doesn't want to be a cripple. And, I know that makes a big difference in that. Now, I was very tiny when my sister was in bed. I do remember. Actually, I guess she was 11, because I was about a year or two. And then all through high school, she had to wear the big brace, and I remember she went to crippled children's camp, and going through an experience like that, it was more peripheral as far as the effect on me, because I was so little, but my family dealing with something like that, and my parents, I'm sure that's made a big difference on dealing with an illness in the family, and dealing with some kind of something like that in one's home and in one's family. I'm sure that's why I've gotten a lot of support from them too.
There's another chronic illness.
Yeah.
It's actually an illness that lasts a long time, where there's a lot of debilitation.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Janet. Could you?
I'm sorry. Am I making noises?
I'm not exactly sure if you are, but I suspect that you might be.
I'm sorry.
Very, very quiet noises.
Okay, that would be good.
It's easy to do.
It is.
Part of being able to talk under such circumstances easily is not to see oneself as if one's being taped. But then one does things like play with the microphone or forget that you're not. And then I know I do all those sorts of things.
I should carry a wire around with me and just put it on people's laps so that they can play with it.
Yes, this is one of those things.
See, look, you're doing it too.
Yes. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you think that we should discuss in understanding? There is something. How do you see what's going to happen from here for you? Do you see yourself making more friends outside of the marriage, beginning to develop social supports?
I don't know. I really haven't given it much thought. I think the main thing, I've tried not to think about it very much, and instead, the only thing that I've thought about is that I know if and when something happens to Ed, I'm not going to do anything different for at least a year. Because people have always said that, and I think it sounds wise, is make no other changes in my life for at least a year. And so I don't even want to think about at the end of that year what I'll do. I want to stay in my house. I want to stay in my job. I want to stay with everything the same and not deal with anything else.
Who do you think could be your principal support around that time?
Well, there's a good chance of my best friend in California will be moving out here. And if she does, absolutely she will be. And she will be anyway, long distance. And then I do have a close friend at work that will probably be good support.
Do you think this type of experience, I know this is a really hard question, and you can only answer from your own framework, perspective. Do you think this experience is harder on a person like Ed, who has an illness from which he'll die, or on you, who must survive?
I would have answered without hesitation even a couple of months ago, me. I don't know about that so much anymore because it's just been within the last couple of months that I'm really worried that this is going to drag out for a long time. And unless Ed starts feeling good, poor man is miserable. He's a good share of the time, and he just can't go on like that for a long time. And yet, see, I get to leave every day and go to work, and see, out of sight, out of mind. I mean, I do that. It's kind of one of my survival tactics, and I have my health, and I'm okay, and I know I'll be okay now. I'm very sure of that. Very sad, but okay, and I'll keep on going. So, it's funny. Sometimes that upsets me. I feel guilty for feeling that way. That not being able to say, oh, it's definitely harder on me. It should be harder on me, you know? I kind of feel like it should be, but I want to, because at least that'd be something that I could take, some of the burden. But now it's changing. It's changing. I have such mixed feelings about that. Such mixed feelings about adapting to life without him.
Feel guilty about
Yes.
doing well?
Yes. On one hand, I don't want to, and on the other, I do. Yeah, I really hate it. But it's the one thing that's I've gotten used to, I guess, and I'm accepting, but obvious, I think it's probably pretty obvious that at this point our relationship is such that I have to give a whole lot, and I don't get much back. And that's real hard. And so I'm try to find it at work and try to find it at other places. And so in some ways, if this were to go on for a long time, when he finally dies, I won't be missing much. It won't be, it'd just be the finality of it and the terrible loss of it. But right now he can't give very much, and it's, I mean, he does, and in that he's constantly thinking about me and telling me how much he loves me and whatever, but it's like I went to Memphis for 4 days, and he could say as much to me over the phone as he does at home, because he hurts so much of the time. He's so uncomfortable. He doesn't feel like hugging and as much as we used to. Now he likes me to sit next to him, and and he likes to touch me, but he just doesn't feel like getting even very close to hugging, and so there's just not much giving back at all.
That's what you miss.
Yeah, and now it's getting to where, especially right now when he's trying to go through withdrawal of these drugs, he's really kind of turning inward, and he's, I guess it, I'm trying to describe how he's acting, just very short-tempered and kind of nervous and antsy, whatever. So he's not even talking much. My brother was here over the weekend, and gosh, Ed hardly said anything. Just didn't talk much at all.
It's the hardest part, though.